Blues music is so foundational to the music that we all listen to, whether your slant is hip hop or you prefer country or your palate loves rock. Blues is at the root of all of that. And, blues also is a unique American art form. So we are not hiring musicians or putting together a lineup for musicians to come out and cover all of the legendary blues greats music. Sure, they may throw a crowd pleaser into their set, but their purpose is to come out and cover their original music.
Lisa Grissom, thank you so much for coming in today. Lisa, you are I'm going to say event producer. There's probably a lot of terminology. You are the co-founder, the owner of a company called Promising Projects. Why don't we just start with, what is your title? Like, if it's not event producer, what is it?
Well, being an event producer, and thank you for having me here, by the way, it's a real pleasure. Being an event producer, it certainly falls within the scope of what it is that I do. Over the years, I've really evolved into using the term event designer, because I feel like it's more all-encompassing, putting together events, organizing, producing them, curating them, all of that is both art and science. There's a lot of business-heady stuff that has to go on, but there's also a lot of application for the creative as well. So I think event designer better captures the scope of what it is that I really do. Underneath that, though, event production, which actually means several different things depending on the context that you're using it in. It can mean actually organizing the event. It can also mean the technical production aspect of things. And so that definition really kind of varies, so to speak.
Just so we're clear, we're talking events. We're talking about live, typically music events, right? Concerts, festivals.
That's my specialty is live music production. So yes, live events, and then the subset within that would be live music concerts.
And how long have you been when did you get started, and how long have you been doing these events?
Going on 2 decades, almost 20 years.
Okay.
This year will be the 19th year.
Wow.
That I've been doing this type of work.
And in this area, or all over the country, or?
No, primarily in West Texas.
Okay.
That's where we're centered. I don't find that we have much application to necessarily, get called out to other areas. It has happened, but it's really rare. It's not the norm. Most of our work is central to the West Texas region. And some of the outlying communities certainly included in that. We're kind of a little island out here in West Texas.
I'm assuming I'll make the distinction, like concert is sort of like this touring, arenas or live venues or something. Festival, typically outdoor, could be one day, could be multi-day. Like, can you make that?
That's right.
Okay.
Sure.
So let's talk festivals then, right? Because I'm super interested. It's summer. It's festival season, right, as far as everybody's concerned. What have you got coming up that we could sort of dive into?
Thank you for asking.
Sure.
And let me preface the answer by saying, we do a lot of work for hire, meaning that particularly in the nonprofit arena, as you know, out here in West Texas, we have a plethora of nonprofits, and they're almost always looking to do fundraisers, right?
Okay.
And it's very common for that fundraiser to include some form of live entertainment, which most commonly ends up being live music. So I get called upon a lot to produce events, and if I'm in on the ground floor, design an event for a nonprofit as a fundraiser. But the thing that is really close to my heart and, just really feels like a baby that's grown up over the years is the Tall City Blues Fest. And we do have that coming up September 21st. So we're actively in that event cycle, working on that. And it's been through lots of iterations over the years. Tall City Blues Fest originally launched in 2011, and for the first 9 years was a signature event for downtown Midland. So it was in the downtown park. And then, as you know, our downtown park went under construction, and so we were temporarily displaced for a bit. We did remain downtown and basically had to take a 4-way intersection and erect a festival grounds out of it. And we had to do all of that day of show. We didn't even really get the luxury of a setup day because of all of the businesses and access to the offices downtown. And, obviously it involved street closures, but we couldn't close the streets until, 6 a.m. the day of the show. And so it was, I probably wouldn't have couched it this way then, but looking back, because I'm now past that, it really was a nightmare.
It sounds like chaos.
It was. And sometimes it wasn't even organized chaos, And so we did that for 3 years, in 2017, 18, and 19. And then, of course, we all know, we had a world pandemic. And so we did not present a festival in 2020 and 2021.
Okay.
And then we relaunched the festival because 2020 would have been our 10th year. So we didn't get to do our 10-year festival. We did that 2 years tardy in 2022. And we changed venues. And we completely deconstructed and reconstructed the festival from the ground up. And a venue change really honestly comes in tow with that because, kind of rule number one as an event organizer, promoter, creative designer, producer, whatever, word you want to fill in the blank with there. Rule number one is really everything starts with the venue. You really cannot start making decisions about how you're going to program an event until the venue has been determined. Okay. That literally governs every aspect of the event. I mean, all the way through to your ticket scaling and how you put your sponsorship deck together. I mean, it's fundamental. So once we knew that we were going to change venues, then of course we started shopping. And we were able to make a really beautiful partnership with the Salazar family at the Destination, which is in South Midland. And they have this very eclectic, open air venue that they've used, repurposed, revamped type materials. And so it gives it this real juke joiny kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. And for people that are familiar with the Destination, it's this long shotgun venue where you enter at one end and then the stage is at the opposite end. And they present all sorts of live music out there. But that's what we refer to as the Destination proper. That's not really big enough to hold the festival. And so up until the last couple of years, since we've been holding the fest at the Destination, a lot of people did not realize that there's an adjacent property right there on the same premises called the Old Lumberyard. That's where we actually hold the Tall City Blues Fest. And it's so perfect, such a perfect fit for blues music just as a genre. They actually built a custom stage out there for us, a VIP deck. They took a big metal building and turned it into a beer barn. So it's like the size of an airplane hangar. It's absolutely amazing, not to mention that the Salazar family is so fantastic to work with. I mean, I thought I had just died and gone to heaven the first year that we did an event with them. And I actually had a proper venue partner that was taking responsibility for doing the work to prep the venue and be ready to receive the event. So it will be at the Destination again. This is going to be our 3rd year, but our 12th presentation of the fest, even though it's 14 years in the making. And it'll be September 21st, 2024 at the Destination.
So let's talk specifically about this festival since, there's a lot of moving parts, I would have to guess. I've never produced a festival. I've never designed a festival. Been to a handful, especially with Terra and I. Seem like huge overhauls and huge events. So can you kind of talk about outside of what's the vibe? What is the vibe of the Tall City Blues Fest? And then we can kind of go into how does it get created, I guess.
Yeah, I'd love to. When we deconstructed and reconstructed the fest and then relaunched it in 2022, we changed some of the languaging to be more authentic and pinpointed about what Blues Fest really is. So it's unique. It's one of a kind out here in West Texas, and it's an original American music festival. Blues music is so foundational to the music that we all listen to, whether your slant is hip hop or you prefer country or your palate loves rock. blues is at the root of all of that. And, blues also is a unique American art form. So we are not hiring musicians or putting together a lineup for musicians to come out and cover all of the legendary blues greats music. Sure, they may throw a crowd pleaser into their set, but their purpose is to come out and cover their original music. We're very blessed to be able to have such an amazing Rolodex of musicians, and we've been at this quite a while, and so the relationships that we have with musicians, these musicians and performers are just rock stars, really. Blues music right now is really kind of where rock and roll was in the 50s, where it wasn't commercialized. Blues music is not so commercialized right now. It's very niche-y. So we're putting together a lineup of 6 back-to-back concerts. And I'll just, give you a couple of teasers for this year's lineup. I can tell you that of those 6 back-to-back concerts, every performer's from a different state.
Nice.
And so we have, in no particular order, we have Missouri, New Mexico, California, Illinois, of course, Texas, and possibly Iowa and Pennsylvania is what we'll be presenting this year. But the other thing that we try to do when we put together a lineup for any given year's festival is to really curate that lineup.
Okay.
We're not just, there's a process, of course, of putting a lineup together, and everyone always asks, well, how do you do that?
Are you talking about like the overall artists, or like when they're going to, like the headliner, when they're going to perform, or all of it?
Both.
Okay.
Because it's a both and proposition. I mean, we have to consider the innards of the lineup, but then we have to consider the big picture, presentation. And so we always endeavor to put together something that stylistically will present a broad spectrum of music that offers something for every musical palette and taste. Whether you're a rock blues person, your slant is jazz blues. If you like more of like the Porchy, Piedmont kind of blues, you like more of the what we call jump blues, which is West Coast blues, and it has kind of a swing about it. It's great danceable music. Whatever whatever suits your palate, even country blues. We try to put something together that literally offers something for everyone. And then we also have to consider the instrumentation for the music as well. We don't want to put, let's say in this instance, 6 performers up that are all just guitar slingers. We want to do both male and female vocals. We want to do some guitar. We want to do some harmonica work. We want to do some horn work. And then of course, just because somebody plays guitar, their style can vary drastically. Mm-hmm. And, guitar tends to be the show pony of, most groups really. So there's always guitar involved, even if it's just an acoustic group. We also try to have a healthy balance between, solo, duo, acoustic type groups, and then bands. And then, a band is different than, say, a big band. So there's both art and science. Putting the lineup together is a little like it's a lot like really putting a puzzle together.
What's the time frame? From plan, okay, you've been doing this particular festival for 12 years, right? 12.
This will be the 12th presentation.
So what's that time frame? Like the day after the festival, are you starting for next year, or like?
That used to be the case when the fest was, I mentioned we've really scaled it down. It used to just be this monstrosity. It was an absolute beast. Multi-day, lot bigger venue. And so, that's exactly what we would have to do. Just, rinse and repeat. Maybe we get a week or 2 break to, just kind of calm your nervous system down, and then we're starting all over again. These days, that's not so much. We can put the festival together. A 6-month cycle is very generous, very doable with lots of breathing room. But we can do it in 4 months. And of course, we've learned a lot of things over the years through the School of Hard Knocks and just experience and wisdom. And so we've learned how to fast track a lot of things. We often have the privilege of being able to deal directly with musicians, although we have great working relationships with agencies. And some musicians have exclusive contracts with their agencies and some have non-exclusive. So it just kind of depends. But regardless of whether we're booking an act off of an agent's roster or we're dealing with the artist directly, we've learned to be able to fast track things and move quickly, and how to put systems and processes in place that facilitate that.
How did you, I'd love to hear how you got into this industry as a whole, but I'm wondering, because you're we have amazing relationships, we have a great Rolodex of artists and agencies, but how, for somebody who's I want to put together an event, or I want to get into this industry, how do you start creating those relationships? How did you get those great relationships with artists when you didn't know them per se?
So it'll be a multi-part answer. The first thing I would say just out of the gate is putting a festival together, organizing an event is not for the faint of heart.
Okay.
Looking back, if I had known all that was going to be involved before I moved into it, I might have said, no thanks, never mind. But I mean, how often do we all do that, right? We all get into a business and you start learning the ropes and you're cutting your teeth, and you just have your nose to the grindstone. And then one day you look up and you go, wow, I'm not dumb anymore. I actually know a few things, and so I would start off with that, qualification, so to speak. But, beyond that, I think there's so many different pieces and parts that have to come together. I mean, aside from the contacts and the Rolodex, networking is really vital. Here's an example. Several years back, the Greater West Texas Blues Society got started up and got their legs under them, I believe in either 2018 or 2019. And so now that's become an integral part of what we do and how we put things together, specifically where the lineup is concerned. We're watching what it is that they're doing. And so their focus as a nonprofit organization is to promote the preservation and history of blues, but also the education component. Whereas we're a presenter of blues. So it's a really beautiful collaborative type relationship. So that's a new element that's been brought into the fold, so to speak. But it's an example of, for someone that has an idea about something that they want to present in their community, whether it's blues music or not. I mean, I can give specific examples about ways to network within blues music because I've been doing it for so long. But in any style of music, rock and roll or rock chicks, whatever it is that somebody might want to do, punk music, reggae, whatever, you have to figure out where those networks are that you can infiltrate and ingratiate yourself. So for us in the blues specifically, having a local blues society is an important component of that. But on a national scale, the Blues Foundation is in Memphis, and the Blues Foundation puts on 2 signature events a year. One is called the International Blues Challenge, which is literally performers coming from all over the world, hence the name International. And it's a 5-day event, 2 days of quarterfinals, 2 days of semifinals, and then finals, which take place at the amazingly beautiful Orpheum Theater. And it's coveted to be able to place in the top 3 and ideally win the International Blues Challenge. And the networking that can be done there, as well as the talent scouting, is just, beyond measure, right? The other signature event that they do is the Blues Music Awards. So I would couch this as like the Grammys for blues music. Everyone's dressed to the nines. It's chock full of performances, but the networking potential there is just as palpable, even though characteristically it's a different event. Whereas the International Blues Challenge, we're in shorts and flip-flops and, well, maybe not. It's in January. A lot of times we're bundled up, because the weather's not always cooperative, but we're casually dressed, with our beanies and our toboggans on, and, in and out of all of the clubs along that strip that everybody calls Beale Street. And, all of those clubs are presenting, this spectrum of all of these different bands and blues musicians from all over the world, which falls in 2 categories: solo, duo, and band. Those are the 2 categories that people compete in. So that's in the blues world, that's a really palpable networking tool.
Are you special how many different festivals or even different music styles are you focused on in a given as festival season, I guess? Are you specifically in the blues world? Are you doing rock and reggae and?
Well, thank you for that question. So, as I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of nonprofit work. And so I buy talent a lot of times and, for those events. And so, I've bought everything from, country to rock, tribute bands. It really depends on what the scope and focus and the objective is of the organization that's presenting the event. So I'm well versed in all those different styles of music. Maybe I'm being a bit loquacious specifically about blues because Charles City Blues Fest is the one event that we produce from A to Z.
Okay. I wanted to make that distinction because,
right.
like towards the beginning, you were saying like people can, organizations can hire us to create their event, right? And so I was trying to understand is like, but Tall City Blues Fest is your baby.
It is.
Okay.
It's our event. I mean, I have a business partner who handles the talent buying specifically for Tall City Blues Fest, but it's our event. It's our baby. We created it. We launched it. We conceptualized it, and we manage every aspect of that event from A to Z.
Is that because you're huge blues lovers, or you just saw the potential in creating a blues event?
The short answer is no and no.
Okay.
Which is interesting in and of itself. I mean, I will be honest. Since this is has a little behind the scenes kind of element to it here that we're talking today, I really did not know. I was very ignorant and uninformed about blues music when we started doing this. My business partner, Ron, is actually a really great visionary. He often has ideas that are ahead of his time, and we sometimes quarrel because he's like, we need to do this, and I'm not getting it, I'm not getting the vision, and I'm like, no, I don't have time for that, that, like, no. And then years later, I'll come back and I'm like, well, I should have listened, and, we should have done that. So I've learned over the years to better listen and trust his instinct, but it was he that had the instinct. The chamber here in Midland actually used to do an event that they referred to as the Shades of Blues. And it was an event that they presented for a number of years, but I think ultimately they came to the conclusion that it really fell outside of the scope and mission of the Midland Chamber and by extension the Convention and Visitors Bureau to put on an event from A to Z and produce an event because it's an enormous demand on a person's time, And so I think they realized that really wasn't productive. And so they surrendered it. And when they surrendered that, that's when Ron came to me and he said, I really think we need to do this. And being as ignorant as I was about blues music, really? I mean, we don't do blues music out here. And what ended up being somewhat ironic about it is that once we finally did move forward on it and start getting traction, I would go and do interviews. And the number one question in those interviews was, so we don't do blues music out here. I mean, we're a country music market, why are you doing this? And I said, well, frankly, because you have to ask me that question is why we're doing that, As I mentioned earlier.
You want to kind of go against the grain to an extent, right? To make a differentiator, perhaps.
Well, sure. I mean, what's the point in doing what everyone else is already doing?
Right.
It's good to have variety.
Yeah, of course. And as I mentioned earlier, blues music is so foundational to all the music that we listen to. I came to realize over a period of time, and this has been very much what I call a growing up in public, learning about the blues on the fly as we were, presenting and organizing this event every year. And so I think that the blues, and by extension, the Blues Fest and now the Blues Society are really important cultural assets in a community. And I feel really proud to be someone that's a part of that. And, cultural change takes place over a slow period of time, right? And so, some people don't get it. Some people are never going to get it. But there's been a lot of education and information over the years where Blues Fest has now, fast forward 12 years later, a very loyal following. I mean, there are people that love it. They look forward to it each and every year. They're buying tickets even before we announce our lineup because they're just so thrilled that we're presenting blues music in a community, and we're the only ones that are doing it. I mean, sure, there might be some, say, restaurants or bars, some venues that they're presenting live music, and occasionally they have somebody as part of, their lineup for the month that is doing blues music. But we really went all in on blues music. And so I've, without really intending to, developed somewhat of an expertise. I don't want to say I'm an expert on blues music because there are certainly people that know a lot more about it than I do. And for a long time I said, I probably was the least likely person. If you had a lottery of people and you said, okay, who's the best person for us to launch a blues fest in this community? I would have been at the bottom of the list. I was the least likely person to do this. But what I did have was organizational skills, a creative mind, gumption, tenacity, know-how. And so you dive in.
Okay, so touching on that part of like your background a bit, for somebody who wants to get in this, they want to be a producer, whatever semantically, whatever title, right? What kind of education or background or skill set is super valuable? Other than just like, because I'm sure people are going to be like, I'm super passionate about music. I want to create events. I want to create festivals and the whole experience. But like, how do they get? Where would they start?
So I'm going to say a few things that might surprise you. One is that passion is not required.
Okay.
Now, passion can be helpful, but it's not required. Educationally speaking, I mean, just as an example, my degree's in accounting. My background.
You're the money person.
And well, I understand that aspect, but I mean, I'm a the lots of persons,
sure.
In the scope of things.
But I feel like if you have an accounting background, you're also like organized, pragmatic, like willing to like figure things out that are complicated.
Does that battle with your creative mind?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what goes on in the neighborhood of my mind sometimes is like really bizarre, because yes, I am all of those things. And I'm also, wild and chaotic, at the same time, and highly creative, but also very structured, and maybe that comes from just being a Virgo. I think those are probably characteristics of Virgo, but, educationally speaking, I would just say that it probably really doesn't matter. And I would even go so far as to say that even if a person is not formally educated, we all get education from just life, right? Mm-hmm. Whether they have a piece of paper that says they're educated in this field or not, I think is completely irrelevant. It just doesn't matter. All the things that you need to know, you can learn through the process of just doing it and experience. And there's really no substitute for experience. And I think that to some extent is true in any profession. Let's take a medical profession where the barrier to entry is having that piece of paper. Sure. You have to have that degree and training. And I'm not saying that the degree and the training and the education is not helpful and it's not valuable, but it's a precursor to experience. And in some fields like ours, the precursor to the experience is not necessarily required. It's not detrimental either. I mean, there are degree programs in event management. Sure. I mean, I don't discourage anyone from doing that. I'm just simply saying that it's not required. Mm-hmm. And nor is passion required. Now, passion becomes really helpful when you're down in the dumps and you're in the grit and you're in the thick of things and things are not going well and you're trying to figure out how to solve those things and you want to give up and you want to run away to Mexico and just, throw up your hands and
throw another festival.
Disappear, right? That's when passion really comes into play, because passion is what gives you that fuel to be able to like dig your heels in and grit your teeth and be able to move forward and find a way to move forward. I mean, so much of putting events together, everything from the genesis of conceptualizing them, all the pieces and parts in between through the finale of seeing them all come together. It's so much about being able to work in uncertain terms, and getting comfortable working in the face of uncertainty. A lot of it is not knowing where you go until you get there. More always gets revealed. There's always, especially for an outdoor event, there's always variables beyond your control, whether it's weather, whether it's acts of God, whether it's pandemics, things that we all never thought we would ever see in our lifetime. So, uncertainty is absolutely critical and a must, for the person that really wants like the sure thing and, they're strictly very structured and they're, always, they never count their eggs before their chickens hatch. They're always very prudent and judicious and contemplative about everything that they do. I would say that this is probably not the best area for that person to jump into. It doesn't mean that person can't do it, but what it does mean is that they're going to have a team around them that really counterbalances them very well. I, for many, many years, was everything for this event. And this event is what paved the way for me to get myself in a position to be an event expert and then ultimately get hired to do this for other people. But this is the event that I largely cut my teeth on, right? And so there was that aspect of like growing up in public and figuring things out on the fly. And I, for many years, was everything from the janitor to the CEO. And so there is not an aspect of this event that I have not touched. And I'm responsible for all of it. But over the years, I've been able to put a team together so that I don't have to be hands-on everything from the janitor to the CEO, and I can be more in a project manager type role. But there are still some things that I do that just really, in my point of view, are not delegatable, and that they're the heavy hitting items. They're the big rocks. Those are the things that I have to do, or Ron has to do if it falls in the aspect of curating the lineup. And so being able to delegate and, let me back up and say, you asked me about education. I would say probably the number one aspect about somebody evaluating whether, okay, this is a good fit. I have a passion for this, which sometimes the passion can actually be counterproductive, frankly. The number one aspect is like personality temperament, I would say.
Okay.
What's a person's energy signature? For me, I never intended to be everything from the janitor to the CEO, but by virtue of having done that work, because that's not preferable. Like, who goes into a project wanting to do that, right? But, necessity is the mother of invention. And so I learned all the different aspects of the event, and I learned those on the fly because I had to. And I even know I have no aspirations of being a sound engineer, but I even know how to run a basic analog. Let me clarify. Put me in front of a digital board, and I'm like, oh, wow, deer in the headlights. But I know how to run a basic analog board now. I learned all of those things by doing and being able to make quick, easy, nimble pivots, and by extension, be able to make qualified, informative, executive decisions when something needs to happen and something needs to happen on a dime. So it needs to be a personality that can weather those storms and, ideally have an eyes wide open perspective about, what am I getting into here? And deeply curious. I think curiosity is probably like a number one trait. A love of learning, those types of things, and work ethic, obviously, we see a lot of waning work ethic, in this day and age, but work ethic is paramount. It's fundamental because it is a hell of a lot of work.
It sounds like you have to be able to handle all the different things without losing your mind and losing your temper, and just go, okay,
Problem solver.
yeah,
Yeah,
calm problem solver.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not always a calm problem solver. I will tell you this. I mean, anybody that's been in a room with me, knows that when I get upset about something, I mean, I'm notorious for like slinging pencils, right? And so far I haven't stuck one in anybody, but
That's good.
I mean, I have a fiery personality, but I'm not ferocious.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people can be kind of intimidated by my fiery personality, but I think you have to take your assets and what your God-given assets are, and maybe your inherent talents, and then work in earnest on developing those things and developing your areas of genius and being able to like bring those things out and make your assets, and by this I mean temperament and God-given inherent assets. We're all unique, and so to be able to make those things work for you. And I think a lot of, just for all of us growing up in life is, we're all finding our way. And so for me, being somebody that's, bold and outspoken and opinionated and fiery, a lot of my 20s and 30s was about, frankly, sometimes burning bridges, just pissing people off, pushing people away. And, you learn through the school of hard knocks, even though that wasn't necessarily the intention, you learn through the school of hard knocks. That doesn't really serve you very well. And so being able to fine tune and finesse that, but still be who you are, and be like, don't try to be someone else, be more of who you are. And I kind of live by this anthem of, for me personally, this anthem of like, be bold, be remarkable, or don't bother,
What is like is there a segue to what you're doing? Like, obviously you work with venues and you work with musicians and artists. Like, is there a segue to owning a venue? Is there a segue to producing music and producing artists? Are they all kind of, do they have easy touch points, or are they very distinct in your industry?
I think they're all related. They're all cousins, all those things that you named. And they all are important and play a part. So it's important to have cultural assets that don't happen often, whether they're annual events or, a couple of times a year or maybe quarterly. But it's equally important to have venues that are doing their part. And even if it's just one night a week, on Saturday, presenting live music. And I would love to see some venues here in West Texas say, hey, we're gonna roll the dice on blues, because we've laid a path out for them, We've proved that there are thousands of people in our community that love blues music and will turn out for that. And so I would love to see a venue here say, hey, we're going to go all in. And you don't even have to go all in per se, like just make one night a week. We're going to showcase blues music. All of these pieces and parts start to synergize. And it doesn't have to be a venue can mean a lot of different things, right? A venue can mean a restaurant. It can mean a bar. It can mean a concert hall. It can mean a theater.
Are you working with all of these types of venues? Like, because obviously we've spent a lot of time on festivals, but
right.
Are you working with the bars and restaurants and
yes.
event halls to even curate weekly events, not necessarily annual?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, with Promising Projects, we really have two core competencies. So one is that event design and production that we've spent a lot of time focusing on. But the other core competency is live music program design.
Okay, what is that?
So it is an example. A restaurant or a bar comes to me and maybe they're brand new, maybe they've been a community staple and they say, we want to launch a live music program. And I said, okay, that's where I put my design hat on and I start asking all of the questions. What type of cuisine are you serving, or what type of drinks are you serving? Are you not serving food at all? You're just a bar. What's your square footage? Let me see a layout of the place. I won't book anything anywhere until I have gone and done a site survey to look at something, and examine the acoustics. Some acoustics can just be atrocious, and others can be very sound. So maybe there might need to be modifications that need to be made before they can present live music, or maybe it limits the type of live music that they can present. But designing a program that is an extension, a complementary extension of what they already do. Because the music should not be, in the case of a restaurant or a bar, the live music should not become who they are. It should complement who they are. And over time, that live music can become a draw for them, but really it needs to be more of an accent. But it also needs to be an accent that pays for itself. Mm-hmm. It's not, and so this is where the accountant in me comes in, right? It's not prudent to just say, well, I own a restaurant or a bar, and I'm a musician myself, and I love live music, and so, I want to pay my buddies to come in here and play live music and do it half-cocked and haphazardly. It's not going to serve your core business well, nor is it a productive use of expense. I mean, the basic fundamental tenet of business is, spend money to make money. But the rest of that story is I'm spending money with the idea that I can leverage this expense in order to make money, in order to produce revenue and income, into the business. And so where I come in for something like that in designing a live music program, again, goes back to, the science of business, but then, the art of design, and being able to put something together that's a good fit and that they can develop a reputation for, that's a proper accent to their business and not disruptive. Sometimes if it's not done well, live music can really be disruptive.
What percentage of bars and restaurants, when they're, creating this from the ground up, are coming to the area of like, we need live music programming from the get-go, versus how many are like, well, we've had the restaurant and we already opened the bar and whatever, and it's been months or it's been a year, and they're like, the music aspect was an afterthought. The second part of that was I'd love to like hear a little bit more about like, have you gone into a venue like that and with them wanting live music and you're like, I don't think this is a good idea for you guys? Like, is there a space where like you should not have live music?
Just because like acoustics and stuff? I can think of two off the top of my head.
Okay.
I have done
Simply from an acoustics perspective or more from like a business perspective?
Both.
Okay.
Business perspective, sometimes, like we all have our blind spots, right? And sometimes people just don't know what they don't know, especially if it's not your area of expertise. And so when I consult with venues, sometimes I have recommended, even though that's what I do, I have recommended against it. If it's not acoustically, that's easy because you figure that out in 20 seconds, right?
Right.
And you say, look, here are your options. I haven't come across one that was just so bad that there were not still some workarounds that I just said, like, this cannot happen.
Right.
But, sometimes I have to get into the nuts and bolts of explaining to somebody that maybe really wants a band and really wants to focus on bands in a venue that's not acoustically going to support that. Here are some of the reasons why it's not going to support this. Like, the best that we can do is some solo duo acts. And, here are also some other things, some acoustic treatments that you can do. And here's some people that you can talk to about putting some of these things in place if this is where you want to be, long term. More often than not, when I'm just making a recommendation just entirely against it, it's usually not acoustically because, like I said, there's workarounds there. But, the times that I've recommended against it have really been more on the business front. Somebody says they have the idea, and maybe it even sometimes comes a little bit from a place of desperation, and we've all been there in business, right? You're looking for something that's going to get boots through the doors, right?
Could it be, well, gosh, business is down.
Sure.
We need bands, or we need a themed night, or we need some sort of like, I don't know, whatever, treasure hunt or something. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you get people that are like, we need something, right?
And so it's easy low hanging fruit to think
Okay.
about, can we get can live music, help us boost our business, get us on the map. People know, because maybe they're off the beaten path, people need to know, that we're out here. And more often than not, I mean, I will say that it does make sense. And then it just gets down to, curating the music to fit that venue and be the accent. But there are rare times when it doesn't make sense. And I won't name any specific venues, but I know
What? Come on.
I know I had a conversation with a venue recently. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to start a live music series because they saw some of the work that I was doing, with my other clients in both Midland and Odessa. And they wanted to start a live music series, have live music every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. This is the place to go. And I recommended against it and recommended strongly against it. And I just told the owner, I said, this doesn't really make any sense because the way this venue is built, it's an amazing, stunning venue. The way that it's built, it's better suited for being programmed more as a destination type venue. And I'm not talking about the destination in
Sure.
Midland, right?
What does that mean? Yeah, destination type venue.
That means that, you're not, if you don't have something going on, your doors are not open. You're not just open for business, all the time because you're not serving food or you're not serving drinks, right? You are open because you are presenting an event. And, this particular venue, they do a lot of weddings because the venue is just so spectacular. And the wedding business is a great business to be in. It's a big money maker. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to add another dimension, to their business. And it has the ability to present concerts. So it's not even a technical limitation. It's not even a capacity limitation. They have plenty of space. Concerts could certainly be presented there. In my professional opinion, I just did not feel like investing the money in doing a regular recurring live music program was the right fit for that venue because I felt like it was going to hold them hostage and create a ball and chain for them where they've got to be there every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whether there are people coming through the door or not. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like that was an appropriate fit for this venue. I felt like what was a much better fit was to work with promoters like myself, people that can buy talent like I can. There's a lot of ignorance in terms of buying talent and people that just have an idea and they're like, oh, I love this particular musician. And they contact the agent. How much do they cost? And agents are notorious for throwing out some ridiculous sum of money to see if they might get somebody
Sure.
that'll take the bait, so to speak. And so there's a lot of skill in knowing how to buy talent and not overpaying for it. So working with promoters and or talent buyers, people that can help you middle agent some contracts, lend some expertise, and bring in shows that you're going to present, which doesn't necessarily have to be big marquee acts that are radio worthy and that everyone knows and that would draw and sell tickets. It certainly can be, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to spend $250,000 to bring in somebody that is going to sell tickets, because if you spend that $250,000, but your venue is only holds 2,000 people, your ticket prices have to be so high before you even have a chance to break even. It's not productive, right? So knowing how to buy talent and then picking the right talent and then presenting that in a venue like this that I recommended against a live music program where people are coming out for this show, like put on shows. And those shows are few and far in between, or, they're not available all the time. So then, when you have them, people want to come out to them. They will pay money. And then if it's a marquee name, they will pay money to see that act.
Right.
And then with how stunning this particular venue is, they will pay just to come out to that venue. That venue has a tendency to want to draw a little bit of like a who's who to it just because of how spectacular it is. So you're using that venue as a palette, as a canvas to put on a show. Now you've got people that want to come out to a spectacular venue. They're going to see a great show, and they're going to be among who's who and, be able to be seen and network. That made a lot more sense for this venue.
Would you own a venue? Would it make sense? And specifically for your events, I'm assuming.
God, that's a bit of a double-edged sword. I have to kind of think about that for a minute. On the one hand, I would say with the workload that I have and often the challenge of a shortage of bandwidth, no. Now, is it something that I would look at as a long-term, long-range plan so that I own the venue where I can present my events? Possibly, but that's a capital-intensive endeavor too.
Okay.
Because you have to have a place where people can physically come and congregate, and whether it's standing, sitting, and then you've got to have creature comforts, the air conditioning, all of that kind of stuff, right? So, it's capital intensive. I don't think I would do that without partners. I probably wouldn't jump off that cliff thinking, I'm going to do that myself. And, there is a certain charm to like little hole in the wall kind of places. But if I was going to do a venue, I probably wouldn't go down that path of just trying to turn something into, a hole in the wall type place.
Right.
I would probably more err on the side of wanting to create a really versatile venue because, I've been on the other side of that coin. We're not as venue challenged out here in West Texas as what we used to be, but there was a time when we were severely venue challenged. Mm-hmm. And so finding a place to be able to present an event either that you're hired to do or that is just your idea that you're going to do. And then if it's your idea, then knowing how to really evaluate a venue. Is this venue the right fit for this particular event? Because you can't just go say what venue's available, what's the cheapest, and then go, throw your event in there. Mm-hmm. That's not really how that works. I mean, for that matter, choosing the venue is probably the most important decision I think that anybody makes because it is so fundamental to everything that happens.
You said in the beginning, like, venue's number one, right?
Yeah.
Look like talent and music and curation is number two. What's number three?
Organization, I'd say.
Okay.
Being able to juggle all of the different moving parts. And one of the interesting characteristics about events is that it's like, imagine you move one lever, and in the process of moving that one lever, it changes six other things.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. It moves six other levers.
What is the one thing that so I'm thinking from concert to festival to regular programming inside, I'm thinking venue, got that locked. Talent, got that locked in. What's one thing that many people in your industry might overlook?
Newcomers to the industry?
Well, newcomers, yeah. Because I would be thinking of I wouldn't even think about
how many bathrooms?
Porta potties, yeah, exactly. Or food and beverage and things like that. What's one thing that many people are like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that many times.
Yeah, so I mean, what you're talking to is big picture. What I would refer to as mental mapping, right?
Okay.
And being able to mentally map honestly just comes from experience. Sure, if you've never done it before, you can mentally walk through the event. What is someone going to experience at this point when they're watching the concert? What is someone going to experience at this point when they're trying to park, when they approach the gate, and just kind of following all those paths. And if you can mentally walk yourself through that, because who among us hasn't gone to an event and been a consumer of that, right? So you have some first-person experience to be able to draw off of in that regard. But walking through those mental maps and saying, okay, how can I solve for this in this particular space for the nature of this particular event? And then that's where the creativity comes in. Figuring out how to both creatively and practically, solve that problem. And And I think, it just comes with practice. You just have to do it. And the place that you have to start is your first person experience. What your imagination, what you might imagine if I had this experience, even if I haven't had it,
Right.
This is what this would make me feel like. And I don't want people coming to my event feeling this way. So therefore, I'm going to solve for that proactively.
Now, music or otherwise, right? Where do you draw your inspiration? Like, what are some of your favorite events or from, current or past, or you were like, that was a game changer for me?
Goodness, I have to think about that one for a bit.
Are you constantly traveling to different events just to even draw inspiration, or are you kind of
Is that
dialed
a
in?
business right-off too?
Yeah,
Research and discovery?
Of course it is. Yeah, R&D, right? I used to a lot more than I do now. I kind of became a little bit of a homebody, during the
Between 2020 and
during the pandemic years. And I don't know that I've totally, shaken out of that. But let me think about that. I'm trying to think about something that was a total game changer. And I don't know that I've been to an event that I thought, okay, wow, this was like insightful and a game changer. It is always interesting, though, as an event organizer and an event creator.
Can you go to these types of events and just enjoy them, or are you going to be dialed into?
And like analyzing them, right? Yeah. So there is that part that happens, and I sometimes just kind of have to force myself to like turn that off and just really enjoy the event. But I might be able to turn off the analytical part of me, but the part that I really can't turn off, and I imagine maybe nobody can turn off, is just the observation. I'm always observing. Now, whether or not I'm taking that, into the analytics of it, the observation is really key and critical. And I would say that almost every event I go to, whether it involves live music or not, there's always things that I observe that I think, oh, that's what that looks like. Okay, yeah, note to self, don't do that. Or the other side of that is genius. That is brilliant. Like, I have never thought of that. And when I have those kind of moments, I'm often seeking the organizer out or whoever the head honcho is. And I'm like, tell me this piece of software that you're using for this, right? Because I'm a total software junkie, I mean, I said earlier, my background's in accounting, and I did that because what I really wanted to do was to be a programmer, and there just was not a suitable degree plan for me at that time. And so I loved software and nerding out on it and figuring out how to bend it to your will and leverage it and, automate it and things like that. And so when I see something that's really brilliant, a lot of times what I'm keying in on is some kind of efficiency. Getting through the gate was so easy and effortless, and it was quick, and like, God, how did you do that? Or I'm bidding on this art auction, and oh my God, this software that we're using to bid is so rad because I'm getting this notification like I've been outbid, and this is a fundraiser for you guys, and it makes me want to run back to the table and like hover, helicopter, so that I win it. So I've definitely had those kind of eureka type moments at events.
Is there anything that you're just like, oh, like every year we love to go to?
No, actually Ron is the one that travels a lot more. Him and his wife travel. And so, they've been to a lot of the, bigger blues festivals, and I've certainly been to some of them, but they're going and doing all sorts of things, whether it's just going to like the local pub and checking somebody out,
right, or,
they're kind of the world travelers, so to speak. It's not for lack of desire on my part.
If you could go anywhere, if there was any festival or event or, that you've never been to but always aspired to go to in the world.
Yeah, the Telluride Blues Festival.
Okay.
In Colorado is kind of on my bucket list.
I like how you stuck with blues, though. You're sticking with blues.
And okay, well, so here's a not blues one. I was going to go somewhere else with that, but like I'm going to dial that back. On my bucket list to see a concert at the Red Rocks Amphitheater.
Yes.
Right?
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been talking about that.
And then, like ping ponging back over to the blues, the Blues Bender, which is in Vegas. And I mean, this is just
That's the
where's
perfect
that?
name for.
Yeah, where is that? I never even heard of
yeah,
that.
it's in Vegas.
Okay.
And oh my gosh, I think they've changed hotels now, but it used to be at like right at the end of Fremont. You know how you take the zip line down, and then that hotel
Sure,
that
sure.
you
Oh, the
zip
Plaza?
line. Yeah, the Plaza
Yeah, the
Hotel.
Plaza,
That's where it
okay.
used to be, but I think they've had to change hotels recently. But it is, I mean, think like spring break, right? I mean, people are going full on spring break. I mean, it is just this party, like 4-day party that is gluttonous and, I mean, just
We know Vegas.
yeah. I mean, there you go, right? I mean, Sin City. So yeah, I'd like to go to that one. I mean, honestly, that whole party scene is not my vibe, and a lot of people may find this interesting that I'm an organizer that puts on events that gathers people in a
Yeah.
public place, but I don't like to be in big crowds.
Okay. Behind the
And,
scenes. Behind the scenes there.
And I'm not really. I am obviously behind the scenes, but I'm not totally behind the scenes.
Sure.
You know, Ron is almost exclusively behind the scenes. You know, I'm the face. I'm the voice of Blues Fest in this particular instance. Now, when I'm hired to produce an event, I'm not the face and voice of that. And sometimes they'll come to me and they're like, "Could you give us your logo for Promising Projects? You know, we want to put that on our sponsor banners." And I'm like, "Look, that's not really necessary." You know, like, look, my job is to make this event for the pieces and parts that are under my purview, which generally is considered to be anything that happens on the stage is my purview. My job is to make this event from your point of view magically appear. You 1 minute it's not there, the next minute you look up and you go, "Oh my gosh, you know, it's there, it's
Right.
working," and to make it work flawlessly where it is not a bee in your bonnet. You know, I'm only going to come to you with problems if those problems are insurmountable and require an executive decision. And even if I have to come to you with a problem, I'm not going to come to you and say, "This is the problem we have. How do you want to deal with it?" I'm going to come to you and say, "This is the problem that we have. And if we do this, this is what happens. If we do this, this is what happens. And if we do this, this is what happens." What path is preferable for you, right? So, I know we're kind of all over the map here
Sure.
and sort of zigzagging around, but that question is surprisingly a challenging question for me because I'm not one to want to be in crowds. I'm not one that, gets out and about. Like, here's the thing. If I'm going to go travel, and I mean, I have traveled around the world. I don't want to imply like I'm sheltered. and personally, I think that part of life for everyone should be that you have to travel to another country. Like, that should just be part of your, coming of age and your overall life experience, because it really does change your perspective, right? And in Europe, they do that all the time because the countries are so smaller. We're on such a big landmass here. It's not uncommon for people to stay here and never leave the country, sometimes not even ever leave the state. So when I'm world traveling, I'm traveling like purely for pleasure, and I really just turn that off.
You're not
completely.
like, "All right, EDC Mexico, I'm coming for you."
Yeah.
It's like completely outside of even live music and things like that.
Meanwhile, we went to Detroit for a music festival.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have some kind of like this real uncanny ability to just be able to compartmentalize when I want to.
Sure.
Now, sometimes, compartmentalizing is counterproductive, and I don't want to. But when I really am like, I need a nervous system reset, I need a vacay, I mean, I can compartmentalize, and I'm not even, I mean, I don't even get email notifications on my phone.
Good for you.
Because I don't want to be a slave
Good
to
for
my
you.
phone. I mean,
I'm
like
the
when
same
I
way.
turn it off, I turn it off.
Yeah. I think it's super important what you were saying about traveling. I mean, my dad's in the music business. He's been traveling since he was 13 in the music world. And,
He was just talking the other day about they live in London and like how inexpensive flights are to like Italy, Paris.
he's like,
Like,
"Oh, we
Yeah, they're
just-
short hops.
yeah.
so yeah, it's
I'm
35
like,
minutes to Paris. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and it's like under $100. I'm like,
So tell me, I'm curious, what does your dad do? He's a musician,
He's a singer.
singer. Okay.
Yeah, he's a producer, singer. I mean, he took over for Lionel Richie and the Commodores after Lionel Richie left.
Okay.
And so he was the lead singer for the Commodores for a bit.
So
I mean,
he's in the big time.
he's worked with a lot of people. Sly and the
Whitney
Family
Houston.
Stone. He's been
Yeah,
with. He's
I love
produced a lot of background vocals and producing for artists. Yeah, I mean, he did all the background for like Celine Dion's Titanic song, and he's worked with Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and Stevie Wonder. And stuff
Wow,
like that,
so he's both on, like the front man on the,
Yeah.
the music side of it, like has that element of musicality, but also on the business side.
Yeah, and he's constantly talking about, these days, you know what I mean, like wanting to produce music festivals and things like that. He's very into like socially conscious music and but also like fostering that talent. Like there was a term that I heard called green bananas, where it was like, all right, you're trying to find these artists that are like, they're green, they're not yet ripe, but by the time that they hit the festival scene, you know what I mean? They've kind of made the name for them, and that helps with the whole, promotion of the festival and all those types of things.
Absolutely. And there is definitely a lot of art in that. That's where in the case of Blues Fest, Ron is really brilliant because he is absolutely amazing at being able to spot that talent before they're really in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And, we used to spend a lot of time in Memphis for the two signature events a year that I mentioned, particularly for IBC, the International Blues Challenge. That's just a hotbed of being able to scout talent. And, a couple of interesting stories. We literally, because, you're up into like the wee hours of the morning, your schedule just gets like totally thrown off. And we have literally at like midnight 30 in the street, coming out of a club, made a offer and a handshake deal with somebody to come and play the fest before they then went on to win the International Blues Challenge.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
And, before my flight has even landed on the ground, Ron's blowing up my phone and he's saying, when you get here, come to such and such club because you've got to see this person because, like, they're going to win it. They're going to place in the top 3. And then I go see them and I'm like, okay, yeah. Like, I get it, Okay. And he's like, we have to make him an offer. And we have to make him an offer now because the money is going to quadruple once they win it. Like, we have to make the offer now, And I'm like, okay. And so here we are out in the middle of the street, like wheeling and dealing and, completely circumventing like the formal process, like really reverse engineering the process of, okay, we're doing this cocktail napkin deal here. And then when we get back to our desk, then we're going to like follow up and flange up with all the paperwork and, run it through the formal channels and get you the information you need and all of that kind of stuff. But he has a really, keen ear and a really brilliant eye for that type of thing, which is why I lean on him a lot.
Are there any artists that y'all have worked with in the past, and you don't have to name names, that were like a total nightmare and you will never do it again?
Absolutely.
Any juicy story?
If you have not had that experience and you're an event promoter, producer, creator, organizer, like you haven't been doing it long enough, right? Yeah. So one year when Tall City Blues Fest used to be out here in the downtown park, I run a really tight ship in terms of the schedule. All of our stuff gets advanced. Performers know exactly where they're supposed to be, when they're checking into their hotel, when they're checking in at the event, what their show call is, where they're supposed to be for show call, what their meet and greet time is, all the things. It's all orchestrated and organized, and it's all advanced to them. And so we do, and so my technical team is amazing and fantastic. And so we do what we call 15-minute changeovers. We're doing a festival. So, we got to keep it moving. You can't just be lollygagging around there. We have to compress those times because, people lose interest. They get bored. They're like, what's going on? Like, come on with the music already.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had one musician, and I'm gonna guesstimate, this is in the range. I'm not going to pinpoint the year, but this is maybe about 5-6 years into the festival. So, we weren't totally green, but, we still had some things that we had to learn. And pretty well-known, accomplished musician, played with some big, mainstream acts. And he's apparently what had been reported to me was he was running around backstage kind of frantically looking for me. Well, he finally spots me, and he runs and he grabs me by the wrist and he drags me, backstage, and he's literally like cussing at me and yelling at me backstage. What in the hell? There is no way that I can do this in 15 minutes. There's no way that we can get all of our gear on the stage and your team can get us plugged in and we can get sound checked and all. Like, there's no way. I need at least 30, and 30 is going to be pushing it. So, he goes on with his tirade, and I listen. I wait till he comes up for air, and he finally comes up for air. And I just simply looked at him and I said, well, I guess at this point you have two choices. You can turn around and get back on the bus, and we'll just skip you. You keep the deposit. I'm not going to send you the other portion of, the balance payable. Or you can deal with it and trust me that this is not the first year that we're doing this event. We've done it this way since its inception. A 30-minute changeover is too long. I have a technical team that is fully capable of making that happen, and they have done that hundreds, if not thousands of times. They're a pro team. The stage is backlined. All you're taking up there is your guitar amps. You're not building a drum kit. You're not hefting a bass rig up there. You're literally taking your amps up there. They're putting a mic in front of them. And we don't do sound checks at the festival. Nobody gets a full sound check. We run this festival style. So you're going to get a line check, and that's about it before they push the button to bus it to the front of house. So, take it or leave it. Those are your choices. And obviously he decided on the latter. And what I will say, for as ugly and hateful as he was, he came back after his show because he sold tons of merchandise. And he had the crowd going. And to his credit, being as frustrated as he was in the fact that he was able to get in the headspace of performing and just kind of compartmentalize and put that aside, that in and of itself is pretty remarkable. But he went on to put on a fabulous show. He had everybody grooving, and he comes off stage and he's walking on cloud nine, and he was not at all shy to tell me. He was very eager to tell me, I am so sorry. Your team is amazing. You were right and I was wrong, and I'm sorry that I came unglued. And so that relationship got mended, very quickly. But I have had some others that, just never got mended, and they probably never will.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because they acted like jerks. That's easily surmountable, right? That's easily correctable. Like, once somebody has the correct perspective to come back and have a meeting of the minds. The artists that we'll never work with again are artists that they just didn't bring their A game. And we have a pretty rigorous vetting process. So we're not just putting anybody on the lineup. So we wouldn't have booked them if we thought that they were crap.
Yeah.
But maybe they weren't feeling well that day. Maybe they, their kid got diagnosed with something serious. They had something else, on their mind, and they just weren't present. They just didn't put on their A game. And then when you try to have a conversation with them about it, and you kind of seek to understand, and then they get defensive, and and then that conversation doesn't go well. And then other scenarios are, I mentioned we have this schedule that's advanced out. It's very detailed. We make it like stupid proof, all you literally have to is like, here's where you're supposed to be when. You don't even have to interpret. You just have to read. And, when we're having to spend resources going up to somebody's room, beating on the door because, they've overslept and they're not responsible, they're not taking care of business, they're hungover.
Or drunk.
So they're, and then they're being rowdy. Fortunately, in my tenure, I have not had the experience where somebody's destroyed a hotel room. Thank God. But they're not showing up to the meet and greet, which of course is embarrassing for me as the organizer because somebody sponsored that performer. And part of their sponsorship includes being able to do a meet and greet with that performer. And then they're standing there looking at me like, well, where's the performer that we've sponsored? And I'm having to dispatch people to go find them. They're not wanting to come. We used to do something called the Midnight Troubadours. Oh, God. It was both amazing and a massive headache, like all at the same time. And it was probably, aside from our kickoff party that we used to do, it was probably like the most crash party all year long in town. And, musicians not wanting to come to the troubadours. And, oh, well, like, I've done like, they have this mindset where they come and they want to just do their show and then they want to leave. And they don't understand that we are creating a whole festival experience.
There's an experience, yeah.
There's kind of like two concentric things that are happening here, right? There's the experience that we're creating for the patrons, and there's also the experience that we're creating for the musicians. And we got a reputation among musicians that loved to come and play Tall City Blues Fest because they love the experience. I mean, we make it easy for them. They just have to be where we tell them that they need to be when they need to be there. And then they have to do their show, go to the merchandise booth after. And the rest of the time, like, they get to party. You know, they get to hang out with other musicians that maybe they toured with or that they've always wanted to meet or whatever the case may be. And that's what Midnight Troubadours was about. That's a nugget right there for anyone that may be listening to this that is trying to figure out how to add some creative programming to an event. Doing a Midnight Troubadours, which obviously is an after-hours event, or we wouldn't call it Midnight Troubadours, but it's an opportunity to bring musicians together in a formal setting let me back up, in a structured way, but in a very informal setting, in this after-hours jam kind of environment, where if you have somebody running it, and here's a tip, if anyone's going to take this idea and steal it, you only have to give me credit once, and after that, it's yours.
Somebody owes you credit in Vegas, by the way, because they do that on Monday nights in Vegas.
Okay, awesome.
Dark Mondays or whatever.
Yeah.
Where it's like, because there's so many musicians and singers and creatives on Strip, right? But every show is dark on Monday, and so they have there's a venue, and they all just come and like jam basically and like meet each other and stuff like that, and then the people in the crowd. So fantastic, yeah. It's like
maybe I stole it from them, and I'm long past having
no,
to give
no,
them
no.
credit.
I think this has only been happening a few years, like a couple years, but yeah.
Here's the key thing to pulling something like that off, though.
Yeah.
In order to make it really a true jam.
Okay.
We learned this the hard way because what musicians thought that it was is a place where they just kind of have to come do this after-hour show and they want to play with all of their regular bandmates.
Right.
No. But you have to have somebody that can facilitate that and can stage manage that. So as the musicians are coming in, they're signing them up. They're saying, okay, what group are you with? What's your instrument? Which voice is an instrument, right? Like, what's your instrument? Other than your primary instrument, do you also play any other instruments?
Okay.
So, for example, this is a great story. Tab Benoit. Everybody knows Tab Benoit in the blues, and Tab he's an amazing dude. He's one of my favorite blues performers, and he's always part of the Blues Bender that we talked about in Vegas. We had Tab come out and headline the festival one year, and got to have some great stories from that. I mean, that was the year that I didn't get any sleep because Tab is such an entertaining, well-educated, well-spoken guy, aside from being, a fabulous musician, that it's like you just want to be around him. You just want to be in the same room. Like, you can't get enough of him. And he came in on his big tour bus, and I mean, several of us just spent like all night up talking, under this proverbial, like, solving the world's problems, having, spontaneous conversation with Tab. But, Tab's mostly known as a guitar player. And a great vocalist, too. He has a really unique voice. He comes to Troubadours, and he tells my organizer, he's like, well, I want to play drums. Everybody's expecting him. He's a drummer, right? Everybody's expecting him to get up and wail on the guitar, to some, blues classic. No, he's sitting behind the drum kit, and he was smiling ear to ear. I mean, it was just thrilling for him. So the goal of being able to successfully try to coordinate something like an after-hours Troubadours kind of event, it has to have a bit of a like risque after hours. It's like adult only,
sure.
Not appropriate for children type of event, because by then everyone's kind of liquored up. They've been partying, and so they're a little rowdy. But the key thing for that, aside from having security, the key thing is do not let bands that already perform together get on stage. You have to have somebody doing that intake and that's calling the shots and is mixing and matching.
Okay.
So that different performers are getting up and playing with each other in songs that they all know. And it doesn't even have to be songs that they all know, although that's what most commonly comes out at troubadours. It could be playing somebody's original. And somebody can just simply say to someone else, hey, man, and it depends on what the instrument is, right? Obviously, the key of G is completely irrelevant for a drummer, but they look at the bass player, somebody's going to sit in on their original song and say, hey, man, I'm in the key of G. And, if there's any key changes, let them know, whatever. And they can follow, right? And they can do that improvisationally, So there's a lot of magic that gets made in an event like that. And it is a total crowd pleaser. So we used to do that, and when we, reconstructed the fest and just basically kind of rebuilt it from the ground up because we were going to be changing those venues anyway, that was one of the things that got eliminated. We also eliminated workshops. So if an event warrants it, having an educational outreach component in doing workshops lends itself very well to concerts because most musicians. And this might be more so in the blues world because of what blues music is than it might be in other styles. So that would just kind of have to be an exploratory thing. Somebody would have to discover if they were going to present a concert or a festival with a different style of music. But at least in the blues, it's not uncommon. It's actually pretty common that musicians have teaching abilities. And that they're multi-talented. They're not just a one-trick pony that, they're a musician, they do this is their instrument, these are their songs. They teach. Maybe we've had musicians before that have a really prolific YouTube channel that people watch for, online, say, guitar lessons or harmonica lessons, whatever it might be. And so we used to have a really fantastic partnership with Midland College, specifically for Tall City Blues Fest. And what we would do is once our lineup was set, then part of the inquiry in figuring out the lineup was asking, okay, what kind of teaching abilities do you have? And so we would put our workshops together that were taught by performers on the lineup. And sometimes, we would always include some workshops that were specifically tailored towards kids. And one that's a big, huge pleaser is harmonica workshop for kids.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to get, Honer harmonicas or, Lee Oscar has a harmonica company, and they're always very eager to want to donate their harmonicas with their brands, with their brand mark on them. And so then the kids get a free harmonica. And even if it's an adult class, they still, get a free harmonica. And it's like getting a private lesson with musicians that are on the lineup. And we've done everything before from, guitar master classes, which, you have to pick the right person for that, obviously. Not anybody that's a guitar slinger can't do that if it's a master class. But we've done that, vocal workshops, songwriting classes, stage performance classes, tips and tricks about stage performing. Here's something about performing on stage that, frankly, I think a lot of musicians really need help in. And, let me just qualify what I'm about to say because it falls in the area of like constructive criticism, right? I think that it takes so much courage and bravery to be willing to get up on stage and like bare your soul, as a musician in front of a crowd, particularly when you're doing original music. That, hats off, right? Like I have the utmost respect for musicians that are willing to do that. But I also understand, even for somebody that's a seasoned pro, there still is an element of the nerve factor, And then without the seasoned pro, like even more so, that's amplified. And so what do we all do when we get nervous? We have a tendency to go a bit unconscious. And so I think this is something that musicians do somewhat unconsciously on stage. They don't control their chatter in between the songs. And so let me be more specific. Commentary is probably a better word. Part of having a really great stage presence is knowing your commentary and keeping it very short. Brevity is your best friend, for those remarks in between songs. It's okay to tell people what the inspiration was for a song or, what the source was or maybe even who the songwriter was or give them a little bit of background. But when you start going on and on and on, in a 5-minute story about everything that happened that led you to write the song, like
Right.
you've lost people, right?
And some political commentary or something. I mean, talking in the DJ world is a big no-no.
Yeah.
Like you stay off the microphone.
Don't tell me to put my hands up.
Yeah.
And well, I guess I've been violating that rule all day, right?
It's like, all right, I don't need instructions. Just, like I'm here for the music, but no, I get what you're for sure get what you're saying. All right. So this has all been very educational and very enlightening for me. But I've got a final question in this world of like, okay, so we've talked about the Tall City Blues Fest. And again, September 21st.
That's
this
right.
year.
September 21st here in Midland.
We'll put all the links in the descriptions if you're in the area, you want to come. Come from different states by all means.
We got great hotels here.
Great hotels. But is this your only festival currently, or the real question is, if you had to choose another type of festival to create from scratch, what would it be?
With unlimited resources.
Yes.
And bandwidth.
I'm gonna take the fifth on this.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. I just am not a fan of like spilling my candy in the lobby, I would say.
Oh, okay.
And so I have some ideas and I have some things in the hopper, but I want to reserve the right to be a first mover on that.
Listen, thank you so much for coming in today and sort of enlightening us on this industry. It's all, sort of like I'm dreaming about being an event promoter. It's like there's a lot of moving parts and we're very thankful for you to come in and let us know here.
And look, I will just say this
Please.
to kind of put a pin in the end of this, because for the listener that has made it all the way through to the end, I think this is just gold. If someone is really, really, they're like, yeah, that's what I want to do, and I hear you. It's School of Hard Knocks. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, I hear you, all those things, but yes, I want to do that. I love to mentor people, and I truly feel like that, I've had lots of people that have gone before me and have showed me the ropes. And yeah, there's always things you have to figure out on your own, and you have to come into your own, right? It's a self-development process. But I feel a responsibility to pay that forward. And so for the person that really has an earnest interest, I would love the opportunity, for them to contact me and, let's have a conversation, let me vet that out and gauge that and see if there's an opportunity for me to mentor them. I mean, this is not going to be a working for me, getting paid kind of role. This is like truly, mentoring them, which can include, being the gopher and, doing some other things, because you have to be out in the wild. You can only have conversations about how it works for so long before you have to do it.
Right.
And you just got to be out in the wild and you got to be hands-on. So obviously an integral part of being mentored is going to be being at the events.
Of course.
And, while it's outside of the scope of, our purpose here today, I mean, just to put it in perspective, aside from Tall City Blues Fest coming up September 21st, I have 4 other events, on the horizon between now and the end of the year that either I'm doing and there's some kind of private event, or I'm doing hired by a nonprofit.
Okay.
So, there are a lot, and I only mention that because we're talking about this mentoring, possibility. So there's no shortage of possibilities for someone to get real in the wild type of experience under my tutelage. Because look, I'm not going to want to do this forever. At some point, I'm going to want to slow down. Mm-hmm. And I think paying that knowledge and that wisdom forward is really, really important to this industry, in the same way that, during the caveman clan days, it was really important for the medicine men to pass that wisdom down, mm-hmm. so that they could survive and they could thrive and, prolifically reproduce and, all those types of things. So yeah. I see that is a fundamental responsibility that I have, but not for someone that's just wanting to, wanting another notch, another
Sure.
feather in, another quill on,
Mm-hmm.
like none of that, right? I'm talking about for the person that like really is in earnest, wants to be mentored and really wants to learn this business so that they can go on and ultimately launch their own thing and spare themselves some of that, some of those, black eyes from the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah. Well, we'll put all your contact information. It's in the description below. You're watching this video. And Tall City Blues Fest, check it out. We'll add a link to purchase tickets and come check out the show. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Can't wait to see it. And one last thing. I'm sorry that John Mayer yelled at you at the backstage at the...
It was
Tall
not
City.
John Mayer, okay? You're fishing and...
I'm sorry, it was John Mayer.
No.
I'm just kidding.
Jerk.
Just
It was-
kidding.
it was
Just kidding.
not.
But thank you again for coming in today.
Yes, my pleasure. It was so much fun.
Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.